The pregnant mare stood defiantly at Eleanor's grave, her eyes burning with ancient secrets as she walked through solid iron gates to reach it. When her foal emerged bearing the exact white star from a Civil War photograph, Sarah felt her ancestors' forgotten promise ignite in her blood. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The first time James Wilkins spotted the mare in Oak Ridge Cemetery, he thought she was a mirage. The early morning fog had settled between the centuries-old headstones, wrapping the grounds in a ghostly shroud that played tricks on the eyes. But as he approached, pushing his wheelbarrow of gardening tools along the familiar path, he realized the brown figure standing motionless among the graves was very much real. "Well, hello there," James said softly, setting down his tools. The mare's coat was a rich chestnut brown, her mane and tail nearly black. She stood with quiet dignity, her large eyes watching him without fear. What struck James most was her swollen belly, clearly heavy with foal. "Where did you come from, girl?" James had been the caretaker at Oak Ridge Cemetery for nearly 20 years. Located on the outskirts of Millfield, the cemetery dated back to the Civil War era. The old grounds with their weathered headstones, moss-covered statues, and ancient oak trees had seen their share of strange occurrences, but a pregnant mare appearing out of nowhere was a first. He approached slowly, hand extended, making soft clicking sounds with his tongue. The mare didn't shy away, but didn't come closer either. She simply watched him, her ears twitching slightly. No halter, no markings, nothing to indicate where she belonged. "You can't stay here, beautiful," James said, reaching for his phone to call animal control. "Someone must be missing you." But when he stepped closer, the mare moved away, positioning herself near a particular grave in the oldest section of the cemetery. James frowned, recognizing the spot. It was the weathered headstone of Eleanor Winters, dated 1865. One of the oldest graves in the cemetery, it was rarely visited except by history enthusiasts or the occasional school tour. By noon, 2 officers from Animal Control had arrived with a trailer and ropes. "Never seen anything like it," Officer Rodriguez said, shaking her head as they approached the mare. "Horses don't typically wander into cemeteries." "She's heavily pregnant too," James added. "Must be due any day now." Their first attempt to lead the mare away failed. She wasn't aggressive. She simply planted her hooves and refused to move from her position near Eleanor's grave. When they tried to encircle her, she deftly sidestepped them, always returning to the same spot. After an hour of fruitless attempts, Rodriguez wiped sweat from her brow. "This is unusual. She's not wild. She clearly knows humans, but she's determined to stay here." "Maybe we should call Sarah Winters," James suggested. "She's got that horse rescue out on County Line Road. If anyone can handle this, she can." Sarah arrived 30 minutes later, her truck kicking up dust as it came to a stop at the cemetery gates. At 35, she had spent most of her life working with horses, first on her family's farm, then at the rescue center she'd established 5 years ago. When she saw the mare standing placidly among the gravestones, something in her expression changed. "Well, aren't you a beauty?" she whispered, approaching slowly. The mare's ears pricked forward, eyes following Sarah's movements. Unlike her response to the others, the mare allowed Sarah to come within a few feet before taking a single step back, still guarding her position but showing less wariness. "She seems attached to that spot," James explained, pointing to Eleanor's grave. "Won't budge from it." Sarah's brow furrowed. "Winters, any relation to you?" James shook his head. "Just a coincidence. Eleanor Winters died in 1865. According to the cemetery records, she was only 23. Sarah knelt to examine the weathered inscription on the headstone. "Beloved wife of Captain Thomas Winters," she read aloud. "Taken too soon, but never forgotten." The mare nickered softly, the first sound they'd heard from her. "That's strange," Sarah said, looking from the grave to the mare. "My family's been in Millfield for generations, but I've never heard of any relation named Eleanor." As the afternoon wore on, more attempts to move the mare failed. Sarah examined her from a distance, noting her condition. "She's in good health, not underfed, coat is well kept. This isn't a neglected animal. Someone's been taking care of her." Sarah pointed to faint marks on the mare's neck. "She's worn a halter recently, but no brands, no microchip that I can detect." By sunset, a small crowd had gathered at the cemetery gates. Word had spread through Millfield, a town small enough that an unusual event became everyone's business by dinner time. Mayor Thompson arrived, concerned about the situation becoming a public spectacle. "We can't have a horse living in the cemetery," he insisted, his voice carrying over to where Sarah sat cross-legged near the mare. "It's disrespectful to the deceased and their families." "She's about to give birth," Sarah countered. "Forcing her to move now could stress her and the foal. I don't think Eleanor Winters is going to mind the company." Some of the townspeople chuckled, but the mayor wasn't amused. "One night, Sarah. Then she needs to be moved to your rescue center or wherever else she belongs." As darkness fell, the crowd dispersed, but Sarah remained. James brought her a thermos of coffee and a sandwich from the diner. "You don't have to stay all night," he said, handing her a blanket from his truck. "I live in the caretaker's cottage just beyond the oak grove. I can keep an eye on her." Sarah smiled but shook her head. "I'll stay. Something about this feels important. I can't explain it, but I think she's here for a reason." James nodded, understanding the intuition that came from years of working with animals. "I'll leave the cottage unlocked if you need anything. Bathroom, more coffee, whatever." After he left, Sarah settled against a nearby tree, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders. The cemetery was peaceful at night, crickets chirping, the occasional hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. The mare stood vigilant, occasionally lowering her head to tear at the sparse grass, but never moving more than a few feet from Eleanor's grave. "What's your story?" Sarah whispered. "Why here? Why this grave?" In the moonlight, the mare's coat gleamed like burnished copper. Her eyes, when they caught the light, seemed to hold secrets Sarah couldn't begin to understand. Morning came with a low mist hovering over the ground. Sarah awoke stiff and chilled, her breath visible in the dawn air. The mare hadn't moved, standing exactly where she'd been all night, her swollen belly even more pronounced in the clear morning light. "Today's the day, isn't it?" Sarah said softly, approaching the mare. "That's why you came here. You wanted to be in this place when your foal arrives." The mare's ears flicked toward Sarah's voice, and for a moment, Sarah could have sworn she saw understanding in those deep brown eyes, a connection that went beyond words, beyond explanation. By mid-morning, half the town seemed to be gathered at the cemetery gates. News vans from the local station had arrived, and someone had started a live stream on social media. The mysterious mayor of Oak Ridge Cemetery was becoming famous. "This is ridiculous," Mayor Thompson muttered, watching the growing crowd. "It's just a lost horse." But even he couldn't deny the strange coincidence. A pregnant mare appearing out of nowhere, refusing to leave the grave of a young woman who died over 150 years ago. It was the kind of story that captured imaginations, that made people wonder if there was more to the world than what could be easily explained. And as the morning sun burned away the last of the mist, Sarah realized that whatever was happening, they were all witnesses to something extraordinary, something that would become part of Millfield's history, woven into the fabric of their community for generations to come. Sarah spent the morning sitting quietly near the mare, observing her subtle movements and changes in behavior. Years of working with pregnant horses had given her an intuitive sense of the birthing timeline. This mare was close, very close. "Any changes?" James asked, bringing her a fresh cup of coffee from his cottage. She's restless. See how she's shifting her weight? How she keeps looking at her sides? Sarah accepted the coffee gratefully. I'd say we're looking at hours, not days. James nodded, glancing toward the cemetery gates where the crowd continued to grow. I've never seen anything like this. People are treating it like some kind of miracle. Humans love a mystery, Sarah replied with a small smile, especially one with such a beautiful center. The mare snorted softly, as if agreeing. She had allowed Sarah to approach closer as the morning progressed, seeming to recognize a kindred spirit in the horse rescuer. Mayor Thompson had returned, this time with Dr. Reynolds, the town's only veterinarian. The elderly vet made his way carefully between the gravestones, medical bag in hand. I'd like to examine her if that's possible, he said to Sarah. Make sure everything's progressing normally. Sarah nodded, rising to her feet. She's been letting me get closer. Let me try to calm her first. With gentle words and slow movements, Sarah approached the mare, stroking her neck and speaking in soothing tones. The horse remained tense but didn't move away as Dr. Reynolds carefully examined her. She's in excellent health, he confirmed after a few minutes. No signs of distress. The foal is positioned correctly as far as I can tell without proper equipment. She's chosen an unusual delivery room, but she seems determined to stay here. Could she have escaped from a nearby farm? Mayor Thompson asked, keeping his distance from the powerful animal. Dr. Reynolds shook his head. I know every horse owner within 50 miles, and nobody's reported a missing pregnant mare. Besides, look at her. She's a thoroughbred, maybe even with Arabian bloodlines. Not the kind of horse that goes unnoticed or unclaimed. Unless someone deliberately released her, James suggested. Who would abandon a valuable horse about to give birth? The mayor countered. Sarah had been quiet during this exchange, her attention focused on the headstone. Something about the name Eleanor Winters nagged at her memory. She pulled out her phone and dialed her father's number. Dad, it's me. You know the family Bible and those old journals in the attic. Could you look through them for any mention of an Eleanor Winters? Died in 1865. She listened for a moment. Yes, I know it's an odd request. I'll explain later, promise. While waiting for her father to call back, Sarah continued her gentle ministrations to the mare, who was growing increasingly restless. The sun had climbed higher, warming the cemetery despite the autumn chill in the air. My family's been in Millfield since before the Civil War, Sarah explained to James as they watched the mare pace in small circles around Eleanor's grave. My great-great-grandfather built one of the first horse farms in the county after returning from the war. We've bred and trained horses ever since. Until you turned the family business into a rescue, James noted. Sarah smiled ruefully. Not everyone in my family was thrilled with that decision. My brother still runs the breeding operation, but I couldn't stand seeing so many horses abandoned or mistreated. The rescue was my compromise. Her phone rang, interrupting their conversation. It was her father. Sarah, I found something, he said, his voice tinged with surprise. Eleanor Winters was your great-great-grandfather's first wife. She died in childbirth while he was away fighting. I've got her picture here. It was tucked inside his journal. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine despite the warmth of the day. Can you bring it to Oak Ridge Cemetery right now? 30 minutes later, Sarah's father, Robert Winters, a tall man with silver-streaked hair and the same green eyes as his daughter, made his way through the curious onlookers. In his hands, he carried a leather-bound journal and a small framed daguerreotype. I don't understand what this is about, he said, looking bewildered at the scene before him. The crowd, the news cameras, and his daughter sitting beside a very pregnant mare in front of their ancestor's grave. Neither do I, not exactly, Sarah admitted, taking the items from him. But something strange is happening here. She opened the journal carefully, its pages yellowed and fragile with age. Inside, the neat handwriting of Captain Thomas Winters told the story of a young soldier's heartbreak upon returning home to find his beloved wife had died while he was fighting. My dearest Eleanor and our unborn child, both lost while I was too far away to comfort them. Sarah read aloud, her voice catching. All that remains of our love are memories, and Eleanor's beloved mare, Penny, who now carries her own foal. Robert's eyes widened as he looked from the journal to the chestnut mare standing vigilantly by the grave. This is impossible. Sarah opened the small frame next, revealing the faded image of a beautiful young woman in Civil War-era dress. Beside her stood a chestnut mare, remarkably similar to the one now watching them with intelligent eyes. It could be a coincidence, James offered, though his tone suggested he didn't believe that any more than they did. The journal mentions that Eleanor was buried with a lock of Penny's mane, Robert said quietly, reading over Sarah's shoulder. She loved that horse more than anything except her husband. Thomas writes that the mare visited Eleanor's grave every day until she died. The mare nickered softly, drawing their attention. She had stopped pacing and stood with her head lowered, her sides heaving slightly. "It's starting," Sarah said, handing the precious items back to her father and moving quickly to the mare's side. "She's going into labor." Words spread rapidly through the crowd. Rather than growing louder, a hush fell over the cemetery, as if everyone present understood they were witnessing something profound. Dr. Reynolds pushed through the spectators, medical bag in hand. "Should we try to move her somewhere more appropriate?" he asked, though he already seemed to know the answer. Sarah shook her head. "She came here for a reason. This is where she wants her foal to be born." As the afternoon sun cast long shadows among the headstones, the mare lay down carefully on the grass beside Eleanor's grave. Her breathing became more labored, her powerful body preparing for the miracle of birth. "Give her space," Sarah instructed, motioning for everyone to step back. "She knows what she's doing." The mare's eyes met Sarah's, and in that moment, a connection seemed to pass between them. Woman to mare, present to past, a thread of understanding that transcended the rational world. And as the first signs of the foal's arrival became evident, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were all participants in a story much older and more mysterious than any of them had imagined, a story that had begun 150 years ago and was about to reveal its extraordinary conclusion. Time seemed to slow as the mare's labor progressed. The crowd at the cemetery gates had grown eerily quiet, many people recording with their phones, others simply watching with bated breath. Dr. Reynolds stood ready but kept his distance, respecting the natural process unfolding before them. Sarah remained closest to the mare, her presence a calming influence in what could have been a chaotic scene. "She's doing perfectly," Sarah murmured to her father, who hadn't left her side since arriving with the journal. "Textbook labor so far." Robert nodded, his eyes moving between the mare and the faded daguerreotype he still held. The resemblance was uncanny, not just the coloring and build, but something in the eyes, an intelligence that seemed to transcend the ordinary. "I always thought Thomas's journals were part history, part fancy," he admitted quietly. He wrote about Penny as if she were almost human, how she seemed to understand things no horse should. As if hearing her name from the past, the mare raised her head slightly, her dark eyes finding Robert's face, before another contraction drew her attention back to the task at hand. James had created a perimeter of rope around the area, keeping the spectators at a respectful distance. Mayor Thompson had ceased his objections, now as captivated as everyone else by the unfolding drama. Local news crews had arrived, but they too maintained a reverent distance, filming from the edges of the cemetery. "I've been thinking about the timing," Sarah said, her voice low enough that only her father and James could hear. Today is October 17th. Robert's eyebrows rose. Eleanor died on October 17th, 1865. Exactly 160 years ago today, Sarah confirmed, the significance settling over them like the afternoon shadows stretching across the graves. The mare's breathing quickened, her powerful body working with ancient wisdom to bring new life into the world. Sarah moved closer, her experienced eyes watching for any signs of trouble, but the birth was progressing smoothly. "Look," James whispered suddenly, pointing to something remarkable. A shaft of sunlight had broken through the clouds, illuminating Eleanor's grave and the laboring mare beside it. The warm golden light seemed to pulse with each of the mare's contractions, as if nature itself was acknowledging the significance of this moment. "The foal's coming," Dr. Reynolds announced, breaking the spell of silence. With a final powerful effort, the mare delivered her foal onto the soft grass beside Eleanor's grave. The tiny creature lay wet and new, its chest heaving with first breaths as the mare turned her head to nuzzle her offspring. "It's a filly," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "A perfect little filly." The newborn foal was primarily chestnut like her mother, but with one extraordinary feature, a perfect white star on her forehead, exactly matching the marking on the mare in the ancient photograph beside Eleanor. A collective gasp went up from the onlookers, followed by spontaneous applause. Even those who had come out of mere curiosity seemed to understand they had witnessed something beyond ordinary explanation. The mare licked her foal diligently, encouraging her to rise. With wobbling legs, the newborn struggled to stand, falling once, twice, then successfully rising on her third attempt. Her first uncertain steps carried her not toward her mother, but directly to Eleanor's headstone, where she rested her star-marked forehead against the weathered stone for a brief moment before returning to her mother's side. "Did you see that?" someone in the crowd exclaimed. The foal touched the grave. Murmurs rippled through the spectators, theories and explanations flowing freely. Some spoke of reincarnation, others of guardian spirits. A few skeptics suggested it was merely coincidence, the random movements of a newborn animal. But even they couldn't deny the peculiar chain of events. A pregnant mare appearing from nowhere on the anniversary of Eleanor's death, giving birth beside her grave to a foal bearing the same marking as her long-dead predecessor. Sarah watched in wonder as the mare guided her foal to nurse for the first time. The intimate moment between mother and child felt sacred, heightened by the strange circumstances that had brought them all to this place. "What do we do now?" Mayor Thompson asked, approaching Sarah with newfound respect. "She's had her foal. Will she leave willingly?" "I don't think we should rush anything," Sarah replied. "Let her rest here tonight. Tomorrow will be soon enough to think about moving them." The mayor nodded, surprisingly amenable. "I'll arrange for security overnight. Keep the curious away." As the afternoon waned into evening, most of the crowd dispersed, though a dedicated few remained, setting up lawn chairs at the cemetery's edge. The story had spread beyond Millfield, with social media posts and news reports drawing attention from around the state. Sarah, her father, and James sat together near the new mother and foal, speaking in low voices as darkness began to fall. "I've been reading more of Thomas's journal," Robert said, turning pages carefully in the fading light. "There's something here about a promise." "What kind of promise?" Sarah asked, accepting a sandwich James had brought from his cottage. Robert adjusted his reading glasses. "After Eleanor died, Thomas writes that he made a vow to her. He promised that their bloodline would always care for horses, that the bond Eleanor shared with Penny would be honored for generations. The Winters family has been breeding and training horses ever since," Sarah mused, "a tradition that started with Thomas." "Until you broke it by starting the rescue," James observed. Sarah shook her head slowly. I didn't break it. I expanded it. Eleanor loved her mare, not just as a valuable animal, but as a companion, a friend. The rescue honors that kind of bond more than breeding ever could. As if confirming her words, the mare nickered softly, her eyes finding Sarah's in the growing darkness. "She's trying to tell us something," Robert said, not entirely joking. Sarah rose and approached the mare and foal, kneeling beside them. The mare allowed her to stroke the foal's damp coat, a privilege rarely granted so soon after birth. "What should we name her?" Sarah asked, looking back at her father. Robert didn't hesitate. "Eleanor," he said simply, "after her mistress from long ago." "Eleanor it is," Sarah agreed, running her hand gently over the white star on the foal's forehead. As night fully descended, James brought lanterns to light their vigil. The mare and foal rested peacefully beside Eleanor's grave, the newborn sleeping while her mother remained alert, watching over her offspring with the fierce devotion of maternal love. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the mare's appearance and the foal's birth were not the end of this strange story, but rather the beginning. Something had been set in motion, a reconciliation between past and present, a fulfillment of promises made long ago, a reminder of bonds that transcended time and even death itself. And as the stars appeared overhead, Sarah wondered what tomorrow would bring and what further secrets the mare might yet reveal. Dawn broke over Oak Ridge Cemetery with a golden light that seemed to bless the unusual tableau, a mare and her newborn foal resting peacefully beside a Civil War-era grave, watched over by Sarah, who had refused to leave them through the night. James had brought her blankets and more coffee, checking on her periodically from his cottage, while her father had reluctantly returned home with promises to come back in the morning. The foal had gained strength overnight, now standing steadily on her spindly legs, exploring the immediate area around her mother with the curiosity typical of newborns. What wasn't typical was how the mare allowed Sarah to approach and handle the foal, a level of trust rarely seen in even the most domesticated horses so soon after birth. "You're a natural," Dr. Reynolds commented, arriving early to check on the pair. He watched as Sarah gently examined the foal, running her hands over the little body with practiced ease. Both mother and daughter appear to be in excellent health. "She's perfect," Sarah agreed, stepping back to let the foal return to her mother. Strong legs, clear eyes, good appetite. She nursed several times during the night. The mare nuzzled her foal, then raised her head to look directly at Sarah, as if sharing her pride in her offspring. The connection between them was palpable, something that went beyond Sarah's usual rapport with horses. "The question remains," Dr. Reynolds said, packing away his stethoscope. "What do we do now? They can't stay in the cemetery indefinitely." Sarah nodded, having contemplated this very question through the long night hours. "My rescue has plenty of room. Once they're ready to travel, I can bring a trailer and take them there." "And if someone comes forward to claim them?" Sarah's expression tightened slightly. "Then we'll deal with that if it happens. But I have a feeling no one will." By mid-morning, her father had returned, bringing fresh clothes for Sarah and an old wooden box he'd discovered in the attic. "I found this hidden behind some trunks," he explained, setting it down carefully on a flat gravestone nearby. "It has Thomas's initials on it, but I've never seen it before." The box was crafted of dark walnut, its brass hinges tarnished with age. The initials TW were burned into the lid, along with the date 1866, a year after Eleanor's death. Sarah glanced at the mare, who had raised her head at the box's appearance, her ears pricked forward with interest. "Let's open it." Inside, nestled in faded velvet, lay several items: a small leather pouch, a tarnished silver locket, a folded piece of yellowed paper, and what appeared to be a plaited bracelet of horsehair. "This must be a lock of Penny's mane," Robert said, carefully lifting the braided horsehair. the one Thomas mentioned in his journal. Sarah reached for the folded paper, opening it delicately to reveal elegant handwriting in faded ink. "My dearest Eleanor," she read aloud, "though you have been taken from me, your spirit lives on in the mare you so loved and the foal she now carries. I make this solemn vow. Our bloodline shall forever be guardians of these noble creatures, honoring the bond you shared with Penny. And should the day come when our family forgets this sacred duty, may Penny's descendants remind us of our promise." The mare nickered softly, as if responding to the words from across the centuries. Her foal pranced delicately around Eleanor's headstone, her tiny hooves barely disturbing the grass. "Open the locket," James suggested, having joined them during the reading. Inside the silver oval was a miniature portrait of Eleanor, her beauty evident even in the faded painting. On the opposite side was a lock of dark hair, presumably Eleanor's, intertwined with a few strands of what could only be horsehair. "And the pouch?" Sarah prompted, pointing to the final item. Robert opened it carefully, tipping the contents into his palm. A small ring fell out, a simple gold band inscribed on the inside. "Thomas and Eleanor, forever as one." "Her wedding ring," Sarah whispered. "He must have recovered it after her burial." "But why hide these things away?" James wondered. "Why not pass them down through the family?" Robert's expression grew thoughtful. "The journal mentions that Thomas remarried several years after Eleanor's death. His second wife, our direct ancestor, may not have appreciated these mementos of his first love." Sarah was only half listening, her attention drawn to the mare, who had approached the box and was sniffing it intently. The foal followed, touching the wooden container with her muzzle, then raising her head to look at Sarah with eyes that seemed impossibly wise for a creature less than a day old. "I think," Sarah said slowly, "that we're meant to take these items to the rescue center. That's why she came here, not just to give birth, but to lead us to this box." "That's quite a leap," Dr. Reynolds said skeptically, having remained silent during the discoveries. "Is it?" Sarah countered. "What are the odds of a pregnant mare appearing at this specific grave on the anniversary of Eleanor's death, of giving birth to a foal with the exact same marking as Penny, of my father finding a hidden box that's been lost for generations on the very next day?" Before anyone could respond, the sound of tires on gravel announced a new arrival. A sleek black SUV pulled up at the cemetery gates, and a tall man in an expensive suit emerged, flanked by two others who remained by the vehicle. "That's Harrison Blackwood," Mayor Thompson said, hurrying over from where he'd been speaking with some reporters. "The real estate developer. What's he doing here?" Blackwood strode purposefully through the cemetery, his polished shoes incongruous among the ancient gravestones. He stopped a respectful distance from the mare and foal, his keen eyes taking in the scene before him. "Ms. Winters," he said, addressing Sarah directly, "I believe you found my horse." Sarah stood, instinctively positioning herself between Blackwood and the mare. "Your horse?" she asked, unable to keep the skepticism from her voice. "Indeed. She escaped from my property 3 days ago. Valuable animal carrying an even more valuable foal. I've come to collect them both." His tone was smooth, reasonable, but something in his eyes made Sarah uneasy. "Do you have proof of ownership?" Dr. Reynolds asked, stepping forward. Blackwood smiled thinly. "My associate has the documentation in the car, but I can describe her distinguishing characteristics if you prefer. The small scar on her left flank, the unique pattern of her hooves, the fact that the sire of her foal is Royal Triumph, Triple Crown winner 3 years ago." Sarah glanced at the mare, noting the small scar that Blackwood had mentioned. It was partially hidden by her coat, not something a casual observer would notice. "If she's your horse," Sarah said carefully, "you won't mind telling us her name." Destiny's Promise, Blackwood replied without hesitation, though we call her Desi around the stables. At the sound of the name, the mare's ears flicked, a reaction that didn't escape anyone's notice. Sarah felt her heart sink. If Blackwood was telling the truth, her theory about the mare's connection to Eleanor and Penny was nothing but wishful thinking. Yet something felt wrong about his sudden appearance, about the cold way he regarded the mare and her newborn foal. "I'll need to see those documents," she said firmly, "and verification of the microchip if she has one." Blackwood's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, we can handle all the formalities right away. I'm eager to get her and the foal back home where they belong." As his associate approached with a folder of papers, Sarah couldn't help noticing how the mare had positioned herself, keeping her body between her foal and the newcomers, her eyes never leaving Blackwood's face. It wasn't the reaction of a horse seeing her owner. It was the wariness of prey in the presence of a predator. And Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that despite Blackwood's smooth words and documentation, something was very, very wrong. The documentation Blackwood presented was impeccable. Registration papers, veterinary records, even photographs of the mare at his estate. Everything pointed to his legitimate ownership of Destiny's Promise, a thoroughbred with impressive bloodlines and considerable value. The papers showed he had purchased her 2 years ago from a prestigious Kentucky breeding farm, paying a small fortune. "As you can see," Blackwood said smoothly, "everything is in order. I've already arranged for transportation to take her and the foal back to my facility." Sarah examined the papers carefully, looking for any discrepancy, any reason to doubt his claim. The mare, whether she was Destiny's Promise or something more mysterious, stood tensely nearby, her body language screaming distrust. "There's no microchip?" Sarah asked, noticing its absence in the documentation. "She was scheduled for chipping next month," Blackwood explained, his patience clearly wearing thin. "We prefer to wait until after foaling for pregnant mares." Dr. Reynolds nodded reluctantly. "That's not uncommon practice." "I don't understand something," Sarah persisted, handing the folder to her father for his review. "If this is your valuable mare, why wait 3 days to claim her? Surely you noticed she was missing immediately." A flash of annoyance crossed Blackwood's face before his smooth facade returned. "We've been searching, of course. My staff has been scouring the county. It wasn't until I saw the news report this morning that I realized where she'd gone." Mayor Thompson stepped forward, eager to resolve the situation. "Well, this seems straightforward. Mr. Blackwood has provided documentation proving ownership. The mare and foal should be returned to him. With appropriate compensation for their care, of course," Blackwood added magnanimously. "I'm prepared to make a generous donation to your rescue center, Ms. Winters, in appreciation of your assistance." Sarah felt trapped. The documentation seemed legitimate, yet every instinct told her something was wrong. The mare's behavior, the extraordinary circumstances of her appearance at Eleanor's grave, the timing, it couldn't all be coincidence. "Before we proceed," Robert said suddenly, "I'd like Mr. Blackwood to tell us about the sire of this foal. You mentioned Royal Triumph?" Blackwood nodded. "That's correct. I arranged the breeding myself. Cost a small fortune for his stud services, but well worth it for the bloodlines." "And what color is Royal Triumph?" Robert asked casually. "Black, of course, one of the finest black thoroughbreds racing today." Robert exchanged a glance with Sarah. "Then perhaps you can explain why the foal is chestnut, with a white star identical to her mother's, and to a horse that lived 160 years ago." A momentary flicker of confusion crossed Blackwood's face. "Genetics can be unpredictable," he said dismissively. "The star is coincidental, and chestnut coloring can emerge from recessive genes." "Mr. Blackwood," Sarah said, stepping closer to the mare, "if this is truly your horse, you won't mind if she demonstrates her familiarity with you." Blackwood's confident expression faltered slightly. What do you mean? Approach her. Let her come to you, as a horse would to her owner. The crowd that had gathered, including several reporters, watched intently as Blackwood hesitated, then stepped toward the mare. Desi, he called, his voice lacking the warmth one might expect. Come here, girl. The mare's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. She backed away, positioning herself protectively in front of her foal, ears flattened against her head in a clear display of distrust. She's skittish after giving birth, Blackwood explained quickly. Maternal protectiveness. Perfectly normal. Perhaps, Doctor, Reynolds said thoughtfully, but I've rarely seen a horse react that way to its owner. Blackwood's pleasant demeanor began to crack. This is absurd. I've provided legal documentation of ownership. I don't need to prove myself to a horse. Sarah stood her ground. Something isn't right here, Mr. Blackwood. This mare doesn't know you. Enough of this nonsense, Blackwood snapped, his cultivated charm evaporating. Mayor, I expect your assistance in resolving this matter immediately. These are valuable animals, and I won't have them kept from me based on some ridiculous superstition about ghosts and coincidences. Mayor Thompson looked uncomfortable, caught between Blackwood's apparent legal right and the undeniable strangeness of the situation. Perhaps we should consult the town attorney, he suggested weakly. I have a better idea, James said, speaking up for the first time during the confrontation. The cemetery has security cameras at the main entrance. They were installed last year after those vandalism incidents. If the mare entered 3 days ago, as Mr. Blackwood claims, she would have been recorded. Blackwood's expression darkened. Security footage won't prove anything about ownership. But it might show how she arrived, James countered. Give me 30 minutes to check the recordings. Before Blackwood could object further, James was already walking briskly toward his cottage where the security system's main console was located. The crowd murmured with renewed interest, sensing that the mystery was about to deepen. Sarah took the opportunity to approach the mare, stroking her neck gently. It's going to be okay, she whispered, though she wasn't entirely sure how she could ensure that promise. Robert joined her, bringing the wooden box and its contents. I've been thinking about Thomas's letter, he said quietly. The part about Penny's descendants returning if the family forgot their sacred duty. You think this mare could actually be descended from Penny? Sarah asked, keeping her voice low. After 160 years? I don't know what to think anymore, her father admitted. But I do know that our family stopped breeding horses for companionship generations ago. When your grandfather turned the farm into a commercial operation, it became about profit, not partnership. Until I started the rescue, Sarah mused, the implications settling over her. Exactly. Maybe that's what Thomas meant about forgetting their sacred duty, not abandoning horses entirely, but forgetting the true nature of the bond Eleanor cherished. The foal had wandered back to Eleanor's headstone, rubbing her star-marked forehead against the weathered stone in what seemed like an affectionate gesture. The sight sent chills down Sarah's spine. Blackwood paced impatiently, checking his watch and muttering to his associates. His veneer of gentility had completely fallen away, revealing a man accustomed to getting what he wanted without question or delay. After what seemed like an eternity, James returned, a tablet computer in his hands. His expression was grim, but determined. I found the footage from 3 nights ago, he announced, drawing everyone's attention. I think you should all see this. He positioned the tablet so that Sarah, Robert, Dr. Reynolds, the mayor, and Blackwood could view the screen. The timestamp showed 2:17 a.m. 3 nights earlier. The cemetery gates were closed, the road empty. Then, without warning, a figure appeared on the screen. The mare, walking slowly along the road toward the cemetery. There she is, Blackwood said triumphantly. "Proof that she escaped, just as I said." "Keep watching," James said quietly. As they continued to observe, something extraordinary happened. The mare approached the locked gates and walked straight through them as if they were made of mist rather than solid iron. Not jumping over, not squeezing through, but passing through the solid barrier as if it weren't there. A collective gasp rose from those watching. Blackwood's face drained of color. That's impossible," he stammered. "The footage must be corrupted." "It's not," James said firmly. "I checked multiple angles. Every camera shows the same thing." Sarah looked from the screen to the mare standing calmly beside Eleanor's grave. Her foal now returned to her side. Whatever, whoever this horse was, she was far more than someone's escaped property. And Sarah knew with sudden certainty that the real battle for her future was just beginning. The security footage had changed everything. Word spread rapidly through the crowd, phones capturing images of the tablet screen, social media exploding with theories ranging from technical glitches to supernatural intervention. The mare and foal remained calm amid the growing commotion, seemingly unconcerned with the chaos their existence had created. Blackwood had retreated to his SUV, engaged in heated phone conversations with unknown parties. His initial shock had given way to obvious anger. His face flushed as he gesticulated emphatically to his associates. "This changes nothing legally," Mayor Thompson said, though his voice lacked conviction. The documentation could be forged," Sarah interrupted firmly. "Given what we've just seen, I think we need to investigate Mr. Blackwood's claims more thoroughly before any decisions are made." Before the mayor could respond, Blackwood returned, his composure partially restored, but a new hardness in his eyes. "I don't know what trick you're playing with that footage, but it won't work. Those are my animals, and I'm taking them today." "I don't think you are," came a new voice. A woman in her early 60s with silver-streaked dark hair pushed through the crowd, accompanied by a younger man in a sheriff's uniform. "Not until we've sorted this out properly." "Judge Harmon," Mayor Thompson said, clearly surprised, "I didn't expect to see you here." The judge, small in stature but commanding in presence, surveyed the scene with shrewd eyes. "When the entire town is talking about a miracle horse giving birth in our cemetery and Harrison Blackwood suddenly claims ownership, my interest is piqued." She turned to Blackwood, her expression neutral but assessing. "Especially since your Millfield Meadows development proposal is before my court next week." Sarah looked between them, suddenly understanding. "Millfield Meadows? You mean the luxury housing development plan for the old Carson property?" "The very same," Judge Harmon confirmed. 300 acres of prime horse country about to become golf courses and McMansions. "That has nothing to do with my mare," Blackwood insisted, though a muscle twitched in his jaw. "Perhaps not," the judge conceded, "but it does raise questions about your sudden appearance here." She turned to the sheriff. "Michael, what do you make of this security footage everyone's talking about?" Sheriff Lawson, who had been examining the tablet, looked up with a perplexed expression. "I've never seen anything like it, ma'am. No signs of tampering, but what it shows should be impossible." Judge Harmon nodded thoughtfully. "Well then, we have ourselves a genuine mystery. And in my experience, mysteries require time and careful consideration to unravel." She turned to address the gathering. "I'm issuing a temporary stay on any transfer of possession. The mare and foal will remain in Ms. Winter's care at her rescue facility until we can sort this out properly in court." "You can't do that," Blackwood protested. "I have rights." "Which will be fully respected in court, Mr. Blackwood." The judge cut him off smoothly. "In 3 days' time. Until then, the animals stay with Ms. Winters, unless you'd prefer I place them in county custody instead." Blackwood's face contorted with barely suppressed rage, but he was too savvy to argue with a judge in public. 3 days, he said tersely. "But I expect full compensation for any damages or complications that arise from this delay." As Blackwood stalked back to his vehicle, Judge Harmon turned to Sarah. "I've bought you some time, but not much. Whatever's going on here, you'd better figure it out before we get to my courtroom." After the judge departed, arrangements were made to transport the Mare and Foal to Sarah's rescue facility. Dr. Reynolds insisted on overseeing the move personally to ensure the newborn's safety. By early afternoon, a specially equipped trailer arrived, and with surprising willingness, the Mare allowed herself and her foal to be loaded. "It's almost as if she knows she's going with you," James remarked as he helped secure the trailer doors. "Maybe she does," Sarah replied softly. The drive to Winter Haven Rescue was mercifully short, just under 5 miles from the cemetery. The property, 50 acres of rolling pastures bordered by oak and maple trees now brilliant with autumn colors, had once been part of the original Winters family farm. Sarah had purchased it back 3 years ago when the opportunity arose, feeling a strange pull to reclaim this particular piece of her family's past. Upon arrival, Sarah directed the trailer to a private paddock near the main barn, well away from the other rescued horses. As the Mare and Foal were unloaded, Sarah was struck again by their calm acceptance, as if they recognized this place as their rightful destination. "They'll be comfortable here," she told her father, who had followed in his own truck, bringing the wooden box and its precious contents. "I've prepared the foaling stall in the main barn, but I think they might prefer to be outside for now." Robert nodded, watching as the foal pranced around the paddock, exploring her new surroundings with the boundless energy of youth. "What are you going to do about Blackwood? 3 days isn't much time." "I know," Sarah sighed, leaning against the fence, "but it's better than nothing. First, I need to verify whether his documentation is legitimate. Sheriff Lawson is going to help with that. Then I need to understand what we're really dealing with here." She glanced at her father. "Do you think it's possible that this Mare could somehow be connected to Penny across all these years?" Robert ran a hand through his silver-streaked hair. "A week ago, I would have said absolutely not. But now..." He shook his head slowly. "I don't know what to believe anymore. But I do know this. Whatever brought her to Eleanor's grave, whatever allowed her to walk through solid iron gates, it wasn't ordinary." As they spoke, Dr. Reynolds joined them, having completed his examination of both animals. "They're in perfect health," he reported. "The foal is strong, well developed. I'd estimate she's about 18 hours old now." "And the Mare?" Sarah asked. The veterinarian's expression grew thoughtful. "Physically, she's exactly what you'd expect. Healthy, good muscle tone, showing normal post-birth recovery. But there's something else, something I can't quite put my finger on." He hesitated. "In 40 years of veterinary practice, I've never felt such a presence from an animal. It's as if she's more than just a horse." Sarah nodded, understanding completely. "I know exactly what you mean." After Dr. Reynolds departed, promising to return the next day, Sarah and her father settled into the small office attached to the main barn. Robert spread the contents of Thomas's box on the desk while Sarah brought up her laptop. "Let's start with what we know," Sarah said, opening a blank document. "The Mare appeared at Eleanor's grave on the 160th anniversary of her death. She gave birth to a foal with the same marking as Penny, and somehow she walked through solid iron gates. And now Harrison Blackwood claims she's his," Robert added, examining the lock of braided horsehair from the box, "a man who stands to make millions from developing prime horse country into a luxury subdivision." "It can't be coincidence," Sarah murmured, more to herself than to her father. Blackwood's development, the Mare's appearance, Thomas's letter about the family forgetting their sacred duty. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft nicker from outside. Looking through the window, Sarah saw the Mare standing at the paddock fence, her intelligent eyes fixed directly on the office, as if she were listening to their conversation. And in that moment, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that whatever was happening went far beyond ordinary explanation, and that she had 3 days to uncover a mystery that had been 160 years in the making. Night fell over Winter Haven Rescue, the autumn air turning crisp as stars emerged in the darkening sky. Sarah had moved the mare and foal into the spacious foaling stall, furnished with fresh bedding and equipped with a small camera system that allowed her to monitor them from the adjacent apartment where she lived. Most evenings, Sarah found peace in the gentle rhythms of the rescue, the soft nickers of horses settling for the night, the rustle of hay as they fed, the distant hooting of owls in the surrounding woods. But tonight, her mind raced too quickly for peace. She sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by printouts of Blackwood's documentation, her laptop open to a search of thoroughbred registries. Her father had returned home to dig deeper into the family archives, promising to return in the morning with anything else he might find. Sheriff Lawson had taken copies of Blackwood's papers to verify their authenticity, though he warned it might take time to get definitive answers. The more Sarah examined the documents, the more questions arose. The mare's registration showed impeccable bloodlines, too perfect perhaps. The breeding farm in Kentucky existed, but when Sarah had called them under the pretense of inquiring about their stock, they'd had no record of selling a mare named Destiny's Promise to Harrison Blackwood or anyone else in the past 5 years. "What are you hiding, Mr. Blackwood?" Sarah murmured, rubbing her tired eyes. A soft alert from her phone drew her attention to the stable camera feed. The mare was awake, standing alert with her ears pricked forward, staring intently at the stall door. The foal slept peacefully in the bedding beside her. Something about the mare's posture sent a chill down Sarah's spine. She seemed to be waiting for something. Sarah grabbed a jacket and flashlight and hurried from her apartment to the barn. The night was silent save for the distant cry of a coyote and the whisper of leaves in the gentle breeze. She entered the barn quietly, not wanting to disturb the other rescued horses in their stalls. When she reached the foaling stall, the mare was exactly as she'd appeared on camera, standing alert, eyes fixed on the door. As Sarah approached, the horse nickered softly in what seemed like recognition. "What is it, girl?" Sarah whispered, letting herself into the stall. "What's got you so worked up?" The mare turned her head toward the small office window, through which moonlight streamed in a silver shaft. Following her gaze, Sarah noticed Thomas's wooden box on the desk where they'd left it. She had intended to lock it in the safe before turning in, but had been distracted by her research. As if responding to her thoughts, the mare walked to the connecting door between the stall and office, pushing against it gently with her muzzle. "You want me to get the box?" Sarah asked, surprised by her own lack of hesitation in speaking to the horse as if she could understand. The mare's ears flicked forward, her dark eyes reflecting the moonlight. Sarah left the stall, retrieved the box from the office, and returned. The mare watched intently as Sarah sat on a bale of hay, the wooden container in her lap. "I don't understand what's happening," Sarah admitted, running her fingers over the faded initials burned into the lid. "But I think you do, don't you?" As if in response, the mare approached and gently nuzzled the box. Her warm breath ghosted over Sarah's hands, sending an inexplicable tingle up her arms. The sleeping foal stirred but didn't wake, her tiny body rising and falling with each breath. Something compelled Sarah to open the box again to examine its contents more carefully. She lifted the silver locket, letting it dangle from her fingers in the moonlight. The mare's attention fixed on it immediately, her focus unwavering. "Was this Eleanor's?" Sarah whispered. "Did she wear this when she was with Penny?" Without consciously deciding to do so, Sarah slipped the chain over her head, letting the locket rest against her chest. The moment the silver touched her skin through her thin shirt, a strange warmth spread outward, and the air in the stall seemed to shimmer momentarily. The mare stepped closer, touching her muzzle to the locket. A connection flowed between them. Not words, not images, but a powerful sensation of recognition, of belonging. The moment was broken by the sound of Sarah's phone ringing. She jumped, startled back to reality, and fumbled to answer it. "Sarah, it's Michael Lawson. Sorry to call so late, but I thought you'd want to know right away." The sheriff's voice held an edge of excitement. "Those papers Blackwood provided, they're forgeries. Good ones, but definitely fake. The registration numbers don't match anything in the thoroughbred database." Sarah's heart raced. So he lied. The mare isn't his. "It seems that way," Lawson confirmed. "But there's more. I did some digging into Blackwood's finances. 3 weeks ago, he made a wire transfer of $500,000 to a company in Dubai known for trading in elite racehorses. The timing matches when he claims the mare went missing." "You think he just bought her?" Sarah asked, watching as the mare returned to stand protectively near her foal. "I think it's possible he acquired her recently and fabricated a longer ownership history," the sheriff replied. "The question is why? What makes this particular horse worth $500,000 and an elaborate fraud?" Sarah's fingers touched the locket at her throat. "I'm not sure yet, but I'm getting closer to understanding." After ending the call, Sarah remained in the stall, contemplating the new information. If Blackwood had only recently acquired the mare, his claim of a 2-year ownership was clearly false. But that still didn't explain the mare's mysterious appearance at the cemetery or her apparent connection to Eleanor and Penny. The foal awakened, stretching her slender legs before rising to nurse. As she watched the tender interaction between mother and daughter, Sarah was struck by a sudden thought. "The DNA," she whispered. "If there's any truth to this connection across time, it would be in your blood." She knew Dr. Reynolds had taken blood samples from both the mare and foal during his examination. It was standard procedure, and he'd mentioned running basic health panels. But with the right connections, those samples could reveal much more. Sarah quickly called the veterinarian, waking him from sleep. "Walter, I need a huge favor," she said without preamble. "Those blood samples you took today, I need you to send them for DNA sequencing, as comprehensive as possible." "DNA sequencing?" he repeated groggily. "Sarah, that's expensive and time-consuming. What are you looking for?" "I'm not entirely sure," she admitted, "but I need to know if this mare has any genetic connection to horses that lived in this area during the Civil War era. Is that even possible to determine?" The line was silent for a moment. "With modern technology, possibly. There are research labs working on historical equine DNA. I have a colleague at the university who might help, but Sarah, you're talking about comparing modern DNA to horses that lived over 150 years ago. The chances of finding a meaningful connection—" "I know it's a long shot," Sarah interrupted, "but it's important. We only have 2 days before we're in court with Blackwood." After some further persuasion, Dr. Reynolds agreed to expedite the request through his university contact. As Sarah ended the call, she felt the weight of the locket against her skin, a physical reminder of the past reaching into the present. The mare watched her with those intelligent eyes, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the animal knew exactly what she was trying to do. "If you're who I think you are," Sarah said softly, "we're going to prove it. And no one, especially not Harrison Blackwood, is going to take you or your foal away from where you belong." As if understanding, the mare lowered her head in what seemed remarkably like a nod of agreement. Outside, clouds parted, allowing moonlight to stream fully through the window, illuminating the star on the foal's forehead, a perfect echo of a marking that had existed a century and a half before. Morning brought a flurry of activity to Winter Haven Rescue. Sarah had managed a few hours of restless sleep, the silver locket still around her neck. She awoke to find her father already in the office, accompanied by an elderly woman Sarah recognized as Martha Hillridge, the county's most respected historian. "I hope you don't mind," Robert said as Sarah entered, coffee in hand. "Martha's been researching Millfield's history for over 40 years. If anyone can help us understand the connection between Eleanor and the Mare, it's her." Martha, a tiny woman with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, was examining the contents of Thomas's box with gloved hands. "Fascinating artifacts," she murmured. "The preservation is remarkable." "Thank you for coming," Sarah said, setting her coffee down. "We're running out of time to solve this mystery." "Your father told me about the security footage," Martha replied, looking up, "and about Blackwood's fraudulent documentation. I've been following the story, of course, the whole town has, but seeing these personal items brings it all into sharper focus." She carefully unfolded Thomas's letter again. Captain Thomas Winters was a respected figure in post-Civil War Millfield. After Eleanor's death, he became something of a recluse for several years before eventually remarrying. His second wife, Victoria, was from a wealthy northern family. Together they expanded the Winters horse farm significantly. "Our direct ancestor," Robert added. Martha nodded. The Winters breeding program became nationally known by the 1880s. But what's interesting is that Thomas kept a separate line of horses, descendants of Eleanor's mare, Penny. According to town records, he was quite particular about those horses, refusing to sell them even when offered substantial sums. "What happened to Penny's line?" Sarah asked, leaning forward. "That's where the historical record becomes murky," Martha admitted. "The last clear reference I've found was from 1923, when your great-grandfather converted most of the farm to commercial breeding. There's mention of the special line being maintained separately, but after that," she spread her hands, "nothing specific." "Until now," Robert said quietly, looking through the window to where the Mare and Foal were grazing in the morning sunlight. Before Sarah could respond, her phone rang, Dr. Reynolds calling with news. "Sarah, you need to come to my office immediately," he said without preamble, his voice tight with excitement. "My colleague worked through the night on those DNA samples. The preliminary results are, well, you need to see this for yourself." 30 minutes later, Sarah and her father sat in Dr. Reynolds' cluttered office as he and a woman introduced as Dr. Elaine Chen, a geneticist from the State University, explained their findings. "First, the straightforward part," Dr. Chen began, her precise voice matched by her crisp lab coat and perfectly arranged notes. "The mare is not registered in any current thoroughbred database under the name Destiny's Promise or any other name. Her DNA doesn't match any horse in the international registry." "So Blackwood's claim is definitively false," Sarah concluded. "Completely," Dr. Chen confirmed. "But that's just the beginning. When Walter told me about your theory, I compared the samples to our historical equine DNA database. We've been collecting and sequencing DNA from preserved horse remains for years, everything from hair samples in museum collections to bone fragments from archaeological sites." She pulled up a complex chart on her tablet. "Most modern horses show significant genetic drift from their Civil War-era ancestors, breeding programs, selective traits, and so on. But this mare," she pointed to a specific area of the chart. "Her mitochondrial DNA shows a 98.7% match with samples recovered from a mare that lived in this region during the 1860s. "Penny?" Sarah whispered. Dr. Chen raised an eyebrow. "If that's what the horse was named, yes. The historical sample came from preserved horsehair in a family collection, labeled as belonging to a mare owned by Eleanor Winters, dated 1865. "The braid in the box," Robert said, stunned. "Furthermore," Dr. Chen continued, "the foal's DNA shows some markers that are exceedingly rare in modern horses but were more common in the 19th century. It's as if this bloodline has remained remarkably pure despite the passage of 160 years. Dr. Reynolds," who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. "In scientific terms, this is unprecedented. In any other terms," he trailed off, clearly uncomfortable with the implications. "It's a miracle," Sarah finished for him. The scientists exchanged glances but didn't contradict her. Armed with this new evidence, Sarah returned to the rescue to find an unexpected visitor waiting, Sheriff Lawson, his expression grave. "I've been doing more digging into Blackwood," he said once they were seated in her office. "What I've found isn't pretty." He spread several documents on her desk. Blackwood's Millfield Meadows development is just the tip of the iceberg. He's planning a series of luxury developments across 3 counties, all on historic farmland. The total investment is close to $1 billion. "That's enormous," Robert said, scanning the papers. "It is. And it all hinges on water rights from the Winter River that runs through your family's original property." The sheriff pointed to a map. "The river feeds most of the agricultural water needs in the valley. If Blackwood controls it, he controls everything." "But what does this have to do with the Mare?" Sarah asked. "I believe Blackwood discovered something about your family's historical claim to the water rights, something that could threaten his entire project. The Winters family has the oldest water rights in the county, dating back to a land grant signed by President Lincoln himself in 1863. "To Captain Thomas Winters," Martha Hillridge said from the doorway, where she'd been listening. She entered carrying an ancient leather-bound book. "I found this in the county archives this morning. It's the original deed, which specifies that the water rights are tied to the Winters bloodline so long as they maintain their stewardship of the land and the horses thereon. So if the Winters family abandoned horse breeding entirely," Robert began, "the water rights could potentially revert to public domain," Martha finished, "making them available for Blackwood to purchase from the county." Sarah's mind raced. "That's why he's so desperate to claim the Mare. He doesn't want her, he wants to prevent us from using her to prove the continuation of the Winters horse tradition." "But the rescue center already establishes that," Robert pointed out. "Not in the same way," Martha explained. "Your rescue houses horses from various sources, but if you could prove an unbroken line from Thomas Winters' original horses to the present day, our claim to the water rights would be indisputable," Sarah concluded, "and Blackwood's entire development empire would collapse." Sheriff Lawson nodded grimly. "I think he discovered the Mare somewhere, recognized her significance to the Winters lineage, perhaps through some marking or documentation, and purchased her to remove the threat. When she escaped and appeared at Eleanor's grave, it threw his entire plan into chaos. And now we have scientific evidence linking her directly to Penny," Sarah said, touching the locket that still hung around her neck. "Evidence that would stand up in court. Speaking of which," the sheriff reminded her, "you're due before Judge Harmon tomorrow morning. Blackwood won't go down without a fight." Sarah walked to the window, watching the Mare and Foal in their paddock. The foal pranced joyfully in the autumn sunshine while her mother grazed peacefully, the white star on her forehead catching the light. "Let him fight," Sarah said quietly, resolve hardening in her voice. "Some bonds can't be broken by money or power. Some connections transcend time itself." As if hearing her words, the Mare raised her head, looking directly at the office window. In that moment, Sarah felt the locket warm against her skin, a gentle reminder of promises made long ago, promises that were about to be fulfilled. The Millfield County Courthouse stood as it had for over a century, a stately brick building with white columns and wide stone steps leading to massive oak doors. On this crisp autumn morning, those steps were crowded with townspeople, reporters, and curious onlookers, all eager to witness the strange case of the cemetery Mare. Inside, courtroom 3 buzzed with whispered conversations. Judge Harmon hadn't yet taken the bench, but both sides were preparing for battle. Harrison Blackwood sat at one table, flanked by 3 attorneys in expensive suits. Sarah, at the opposing table, had only her father and Sheriff Lawson beside her, but their faces showed quiet confidence. "Are you ready for this?" Robert asked, squeezing his daughter's hand. Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of Eleanor's locket beneath her blouse. She hadn't removed it since that night in the stable. "As ready as I'll ever be." Blackwood caught her eye across the room, his handsome face arranged in an expression of sympathetic regret that didn't reach his cold eyes. He leaned toward his lead attorney, whispering something that made the man nod sharply. "All rise." The bailiff's voice cut through the murmurs as Judge Harmon entered, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun, her black robes flowing as she took her seat. "Be seated," she instructed, adjusting her glasses as she surveyed the packed courtroom. "This is a rather unusual hearing. Normally, disputed ownership of livestock would be a simple civil matter, but given the circumstances and public interest, I've agreed to hear this case directly." Her sharp eyes moved between Blackwood and Sarah. "I understand both parties have prepared arguments regarding ownership of the animals in question?" Blackwood's attorney rose smoothly. "We have, Your Honor, and we appreciate the court's consideration in expediting this matter. My client has been deprived of his valuable property for nearly 4 days now, with potential consequences to their health and his breeding program." Judge Harmon's expression remained neutral. "And Ms. Winters, are you prepared to present your case?" Sarah stood, feeling surprisingly calm. "Yes, Your Honor. We're prepared to demonstrate not only that Mr. Blackwood's claim is fraudulent, but also that these horses represent something of profound historical and cultural significance to both my family and this community." "Very well. Mr. Blackwood's counsel may proceed first." What followed was a polished presentation of Blackwood's claim. His attorney presented the documents, the same ones Sheriff Lawson had determined were forgeries, along with photographs purportedly showing Blackwood with the mare at his estate. He spoke eloquently about Blackwood's substantial investment in the animal, his distress at her disappearance, and the importance of her bloodlines to his breeding program. As for the peculiar circumstances of her appearance at the cemetery and the unusual footage of her arrival, the attorney said carefully, "We suggest that camera malfunctions or tampering are far more likely explanations than supernatural phenomena. Mr. Blackwood sympathizes with Ms. Winters' emotional attachment to the animal after assisting with the birth, but sentiment cannot override legal ownership." When Blackwood's attorney concluded, Judge Harmon turned to Sarah. "Ms. Winters, you may present your response." Sarah approached the bench, carrying a folder containing the evidence they'd gathered. "Your Honor, I'll be direct. Harrison Blackwood's claim is based entirely on forged documents and false statements." She presented Sheriff Lawson's analysis of the documentation, followed by statements from the Kentucky breeding farm confirming they had never sold any horse matching the mare's description to Blackwood. Dr. Chen's DNA analysis came next, showing the absence of the mare from all thoroughbred registries and the inexplicable connection to 19th century horses from the Winters farm. "This is not merely about ownership of an animal," Sarah continued, her voice gaining strength. "This is about a sacred trust that extends back 160 years to a promise made by Captain Thomas Winters after the death of his first wife, Eleanor." Sarah introduced the letter from Thomas's box, Martha Hillridge's historical research, and finally, the original deed with its specific language about water rights being tied to the Winters family's continued stewardship of horses descended from their original stock. Mr. Blackwood knew about this deed and its implications for his development plans, Sarah explained, presenting the sheriff's findings about the Millfield Meadows project and its dependence on controlling the water rights. He didn't want the mare because of her value as a horse. He wanted to prevent us from proving the continuity of the Winters horse bloodline, which would secure our family's historical water rights and block his development. Throughout Sarah's presentation, Blackwood's expression had darkened from confidence to barely controlled rage. His attorney rose repeatedly to object, but each time Judge Harmon overruled him, her keen eyes never leaving the evidence being presented. When Sarah concluded, the courtroom remained silent, the weight of her revelations hanging in the air. "These are serious allegations, Ms. Winters," Judge Harmon said finally. "Mr. Blackwood, do you wish to respond?" Blackwood whispered furiously with his attorneys before rising himself, straightening his tie with manicured fingers. "Your Honor, this elaborate conspiracy theory is absurd. Ms. Winters has concocted a fantastical story to justify her emotional attachment to my property. The documentation issues are clerical errors that can be rectified. As for these supposed DNA tests performed overnight by a friend of the local veterinarian, they hardly constitute credible scientific evidence. Dr. Chen is one of the foremost equine geneticists in the country," Sarah countered. "And I'm sure she's very competent," Blackwood said dismissively. "But the notion that this horse is somehow mystically connected to animals from the Civil War era is preposterous. It's the stuff of children's stories, not legal proceedings." Judge Harmon studied him thoughtfully. "Mr. Blackwood, are you familiar with the water rights provisions in the original Winters deed?" A flicker of unease crossed his face. "I'm aware of various easements and historical claims in the region. My legal team has assured me they present no impediment to my development plans." "I see." The judge removed her glasses, polishing them slowly. "In cases like this, where documentation is disputed and evidence is unusual, I sometimes find it useful to consider the behavior of the animals themselves. Sheriff Lawson, you were present when Mr. Blackwood first encountered the mare at the cemetery. How did she react to him?" "She was clearly distressed, Your Honor," Lawson replied, "positioned herself protectively between him and her foal, not the reaction you'd expect from a horse seeing her owner." "And with Ms. Winters?" "Complete comfort from the beginning. Let her approach immediately after giving birth. Remarkable trust for any horse." Judge Harmon nodded, then turned to Blackwood. "Mr. Blackwood, when did you last see the mare before she allegedly escaped from your property?" 3 days before she was found at the cemetery," he answered smoothly. "And what distinguishing features does she have apart from those visible in the photographs you've provided?" Blackwood hesitated just slightly. "A small scar on her left flank, from a fence injury last year." "Anything else? Any distinctive behaviors or habits?" His confidence wavered. "She prefers apples to carrots, and she doesn't like having her ears touched." Sarah couldn't suppress a small smile. She had spent hours with the mare, and neither of those things was true. She accepted ear scratches readily and had shown a clear preference for the carrots Sarah had offered. Judge Harmon seemed to notice Blackwood's uncertainty as well. "I believe I've heard enough to make my decision. However, before I rule, I'd like to see these animals for myself." A surprised murmur ran through the courtroom. "Court will reconvene in 1 hour at Winter Haven Rescue," the judge announced, rising from the bench. "I want to observe these horses in their current environment before making my final determination." As the courtroom emptied, Sarah caught Blackwood's eye. The mask of civility had dropped completely, revealing a cold fury that sent a chill down her spine. "This isn't over, Winters," he said quietly as he passed. "No horse, magical or otherwise, is going to stop my development." Sarah touched the locket at her throat, drawing strength from its connection to the past. "It was never about stopping you, Blackwood. It's about keeping a promise made 160 years ago. Some bonds can't be broken, not by time, and certainly not by money." An hour later, Winter Haven Rescue hosted the most unusual court proceeding in Millfield's history. Judge Harmon stood in the paddock where the mare and foal grazed peacefully, court reporter at her side transcribing the proceedings. A small group of essential participants surrounded them. Sarah and her father, Blackwood and his attorney, Sheriff Lawson, Dr. Reynolds, and Martha Hillridge, whose historical expertise had proven invaluable. The judge observed in silence as first Blackwood, then Sarah approached the horses. The contrast was stark. When Blackwood entered the paddock, the mare immediately positioned herself between him and her foal, ears flattened, eyes watchful. When Sarah approached, the mare relaxed visibly, and the foal pranced forward to greet her, nuzzling Sarah's hand as if they'd known each other forever. "Ms. Winters," Judge Harmon said finally, "would you show me what you discovered in the cemetery, the items from Captain Winters' box?" Sarah nodded, retrieving the wooden box from the office. She explained each item: the letter, the horsehair braid, the wedding ring, and finally the silver locket that now hung around her neck. "May I?" the judge asked, extending her hand. Sarah removed the locket and placed it in Judge Harmon's palm. The judge examined it carefully, opening it to reveal Eleanor's portrait and the intertwined locks of human and horsehair. "And you believe this mare is somehow connected to Eleanor Winters' horse from 160 years ago?" the judge asked, her tone neutral but not dismissive. "The DNA evidence supports an extraordinary genetic connection," Sarah replied. "But there's more than science at work here. She appeared at Eleanor's grave on the anniversary of her death. She gave birth to a foal with the exact same marking as Penny. And then there's the security footage." "Ah, yes, the infamous walking through gates incident," Judge Harmon mused. She handed the locket back to Sarah. "Mr. Blackwood, do you have any explanation for these unusual circumstances?" Blackwood straightened his tie impatiently. "People see what they want to see, Your Honor. Camera glitches, coincidental markings, selective interpretation of animal behavior, all fueled by small-town superstition and Ms. Winters' emotional attachment to a valuable animal that doesn't belong to her." "I see." The judge turned to the mare, studying her thoughtfully. "In my 30 years on the bench, I've learned that sometimes the simplest explanation is not the correct one. Sometimes truth is stranger than fiction." She addressed the court reporter. "Let the record show that the court has observed the animals in question and their interactions with both claimants." Judge Harmon then did something unexpected. She approached the mare slowly, hand extended. The horse regarded her calmly, neither retreating nor showing the wariness she'd displayed with Blackwood. When the judge was close enough, the mare lowered her head slightly, allowing the human to touch her neck. "I'm prepared to rule," Judge Harmon announced, returning to the improvised court area. "Having reviewed all evidence and observed the animals directly, I find that Harrison Blackwood has failed to establish legitimate ownership of the mare and foal. His documentation has proven fraudulent and his behavior toward the animals inconsistent with a genuine prior relationship." Blackwood's face darkened with fury, but his attorney placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I find the evidence of the mare's connection to the historical Winters horse bloodline compelling. The DNA analysis, combined with the historical documentation and the remarkable circumstances of her appearance, establish a clear link to Captain Thomas Winters' original horses." She turned to face Blackwood directly. "As for the water rights issue, I'm ordering a full investigation into Mr. Blackwood's development plans and his attempts to circumvent the provisions of the original deed. All work on Millfield Meadows is hereby suspended pending that investigation." "This is outrageous," Blackwood sputtered. "You're basing a legal ruling on ghost stories and sentiment." "No, Mr. Blackwood," Judge Harmon replied firmly. "I'm basing it on forged documentation, attempted fraud, and scientific evidence. The unusual circumstances merely pointed us toward discovering your deception." She fixed him with a stern gaze. "You're fortunate I'm not referring this matter for criminal prosecution, at least not yet." Blackwood stormed away, his attorneys trailing behind, already discussing appeal options. But from the slump of his shoulders, it was clear he knew his plans had unraveled beyond repair. As the crowd dispersed, Sarah remained in the paddock with the mare and foal, the silver locket once again around her neck. Her father joined her, his weathered face reflecting wonder and pride. "What do we name them?" he asked softly. "We've been calling the foal Eleanor, but what about her mother?" Sarah thought for a moment, her hand resting on the mare's neck. "Penny," she said simply. "Her name is Penny." As if in confirmation, the mare nickered softly, pressing her muzzle against Sarah's shoulder. "Do you think—" Robert hesitated, struggling to frame his question. "Do you think she's actually Penny somehow, returned after all these years?" Sarah considered this, watching as the foal, Eleanor, pranced around them, her movements full of joy and life. "I don't know if it's that literal, but I believe some bonds transcend our understanding. Thomas promised Eleanor their family would always care for horses like Penny. When we nearly broke that promise, when the water that nourished this land for generations was threatened, something remarkable happened to remind us. That evening, after the excitement had died down and the rescue had returned to its normal peaceful rhythm, Sarah sat on the fence of the paddock watching Penny and Eleanor grazing in the golden light of sunset. She held Thomas's letter in her hands, rereading his words about guardianship and sacred duty. A soft nicker drew her attention. Penny had approached the foal at her side. The mare's intelligent eyes seemed to hold knowledge beyond words, an ancient wisdom passed through bloodlines across centuries. Sarah reached out, stroking Penny's star-marked forehead. "I understand now," she whispered, "and I promise we won't forget again." As darkness fell, Sarah made a decision. The next morning, she drove to Oak Ridge Cemetery, the silver locket in her pocket. James greeted her with a warm smile, having followed the court proceedings with great interest. "I came to visit Eleanor," Sarah explained, making her way to the weathered headstone. She knelt beside the grave that had witnessed the miracle of the foal's birth. Carefully, she dug a small hole at the base of the headstone and placed the locket inside, returning it to its rightful owner. "Thank you," she whispered, touching the cold stone, "for reminding us, for sending Penny to us when we needed her most." As she rose, Sarah felt a profound sense of completion. Not an ending, but a continuation of something that had begun long ago. The Winters family would honor their promise to Eleanor, to Thomas, to the land and the horses they had loved. The rescue would expand with special focus on preserving and protecting the bloodlines that had almost been lost. And in the years that followed, visitors to Winter Haven Rescue often remarked on the unusual mare and her daughter, how their eyes seemed to hold secrets, how they connected with humans in ways that went beyond ordinary animal behavior. Some swore they could feel the weight of history when they stood in their presence. Sarah would simply smile and say, "Some bonds can never be broken. Not by time, not by death, not by forgetting. They simply wait to be remembered." And in the quiet of dawn, when mist rolled across the pastures, she sometimes glimpsed a young woman in period dress walking beside Penny, her hand resting on the mare's neck, both of them finally at peace.